Yo, 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 ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I am here to talk about a film called Dumb Money. And if you know anything about the film, then you would know that it's about a man, a true, real life person exists right here on Earth, and his name is Keith Gill. And in real life, he invested in the stock market in a store called GameStop, okay? And this is a place where you go and you could buy video games and some DVDs and stuff. It was once a very, very, very popular store. And he encouraged the working man, let's say, the working classes, many of them kids, teenagers and people in their 20s, to invest in this with him. And as a result, he essentially crippled a number of billionaires. It's a little bit confusing. It's not my expertise, but essentially it's to do with hedge funds, and hedge funds is when very wealthy people, there can be, make bets that certain stocks will fall, and then they make a profit on those bets when the stocks fall. And all these billionaires assumed GameStop would just go under because everything's gone digital. Things have moved away from televisions like that, and even cassettes and things, and they've moved into digital. So they made this assumption no one's interested in that kind of stuff, so it's going to crash and we're going to make loads of money. And then this guy came along, and he had something to say about it, and he used his YouTube channel to convince others to invest in GameStop. And during the lockdown, he made them lose billions, which is a fascinating story. It's really, really something else. But the film isn't that good. It's not a very good film. And it's quite a strange thing because the story's great. The cast is great. It's a really good cast. There's a guy in it who plays his brother called Pete Davidson, who seems to keep popping up. And he was in a film called Bodies, 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 which is a very good film. It's like a horror film, but it's also like a kind of a social commentary on the times we live in. And it's really quite a suspenseful, edge of your seat thing. And that guy isn't even in it much, and he sort of stole the whole movie. And when I saw him in this, I was like, oh, that guy's good. You know, he'll elevate this. And he did. But it's interesting that him and the lead, Paul Dano, who started in Little Miss Sunshine, and he was in There Will Be Blood, and he's a really good actor, doesn't really have much to get his teeth into in this script. And the whole cast feels kind of like that. Seth Rogen as well. It's like, I'll tell you an interesting thing is a number of people from this cast were in the TV show Pamela and Tommy, including Seth Rogen. And that show is phenomenally well directed. It's like totally first rate show. It's really like so high caliber, and this movie kind of feels like Seth Rogen, I'm assuming because he was in Pamela and Tommy, pulled a bunch of the cast out of that, and then I would imagine the director or producers looked at The Social Network and were like, well, we can tell a story kind of like that. David Fincher's film The Social Network, which was about the guy who created Facebook. It's getting a bit all over the place, this review, isn't it? But it's true. And I couldn't help sitting in the cinema thinking, there's a bit of the show Pamela and Tommy in this. There's a bit of The Social Network in this. Both of those are great. This isn't great. How can it be the story's great, the cast is great, the influences are great, and it's not great? And to break it down a little bit, I'd say number one, the music choices are very, very misplaced. There's a lot of like Cardi B, whatever, I don't know, but like modern pop music, and that is really like, if you go and look at classical cinema and you look at cinema into the Spielberg era, it was often like John Williams or John Williams imitators, and it was classical music. But one of the reasons that worked is because it's sort of to everybody's taste. Now, you might not sit down and listen to a classical album through, but to see it in a film, it's not really offensive. And yet when you stick some of the music that's like modern pop music, you're disconnecting a high number of people who would otherwise enjoy this film if the music was different. And I describe it a little bit as being like, when you make a film, it's kind of like making a meal. And ultimately, the best directors make films they want to see. Just like a chef will make food that the chef wants to eat. The chef is like, this is delicious. Once I'm happy with it, the customers should be happy with it too. At least that's a good way to start. But the thing is you have to be a little bit careful, because let's say, for example, I make a meal, like actual food. If I'm really a fan of spice and chili, I still have to be careful that if I'm gonna make a meal then for 10 people, I'm not gonna give them as much chili as I like. I might put a little bit on the side, but I'm not gonna be like, here's a super spicy meal because I like a super spicy meal. You still have to be a little bit aware of the fact that there are people who, you know, that's not their thing. And when you make a movie, it's a bit like that. And this film is like, the music is kind of like hot chili, and that's not to everybody's tastes. And as a film goer, to a degree, I think I empathize a bit with the audience, and it was a busy crowd, which was good to see. But I could feel that like 70% of the audience were not vibing with the soundtrack. Sort of like, this is dreadful music, you know. And when it's blaring out of the speakers, it's kind of like, so very inappropriate, to be honest. And I don't even know why they decided to put it in, like to the extent that they put it in. And then the other thing that's kind of a fail about the movie is trying to make a, well, I'll tell you two things actually. So one thing that's a fail is that the movie doesn't actually teach you much. And there's a lot of room for a film like this. If you think another film like The Wolf of Wall Street, even though it puts the emphasis on characters and really story and emotion, it still tells you a bit about how the money business in stocks and shares actually works. Whereas in this, it's like it's trying to teach you, but it's not really coming through. You don't come across much smarter than you were going in. You don't think, oh, I should try that. I should try the stock market. I understand. You don't really feel like it's taught you much. And then the other thing is that it's kind of making a point that it's saying, here are all the everyman. Okay, here are the guys who have blue collar jobs. They work behind the counters and stuff. And this very smart guy made them all rich, kind of, as you'll see if you watch the film, because the stock market goes up and down. And the problem is that it doesn't make you root for the blue collar workers anywhere near enough. They are not, none of the people who are like, I'll give you an example. When the film starts early on, you see these two college girls, right, at a college party. And it tells you their net worth, and it says they're worth like $186,000 roughly each. And instantly that doesn't draw a lot of empathy or care. There's something in humans where we innately kind of root for the underdog. And when you see two girls who are in their 20s at an American university that probably cost them 120 grand just to go to, and then you see that they each have roughly 180 grand in their bank, and they're going to invest money into the stock market because of a guy on YouTube who tells them to, and then they are some of the characters we're supposed to care about and root for. It's like, do you really care that much if those two girls get rich? It's like, they're already wealthy. You can't imagine that. It doesn't seem like they made any of the money that's in their bank. 180 grand is a lot of money. These aren't broke characters. And then the other one is we follow the story of a doctor with children, and you care more about her because she's, you know, front lines worker during the pandemic, and she's kind of struggling to make money. But even then, she's not really a very well-rounded character. There's not like, you're not, oh yeah, this is great. And then there's a guy who works at GameStop, which was an interesting idea. He's the same actor who was in the recent Transformers movie, and he's really good in that. He's very cool and likable, and in this, he's, again, like, all the cast are really good, but you just don't care that much. And I was kind of thinking, if this is gonna make me root for the everyman, why don't they give us like some people to really care about? Why don't you give us somebody who say lost their job during the pandemic and is desperate to make ends meet? Or in America, you know, the healthcare system is really a problem for a lot of people. I met an American guy once who was $1 million in debt just because he had cancer. Right? I met the guy in a queue. What was the shop? I think it was like a Kmart or something. And he started telling me about how he had to move in with him and his wife moved in with their children because they had to sell the house just to pay for the medical bills. Somebody like that, which is unfortunately not that uncommon a story, you'd care much more if the guy's having to undergo operations he can't afford, and then he gets an opportunity to make money on the stock market because of the advice of YouTube. You just empathize with the person more. And there are many, well, there's no end to stories, I'm sure, of people who actually made money where you're like, you want to see them make money. You're like, I want to see them succeed. I want to see them get out of the darkness. And the movie didn't do that. Like it didn't really show us anyone where we really want them to succeed. It all felt synthetic in the way money really can be, where it's like, you know, like the Beatles saying money can't buy me love, and they say money can't buy you happiness, and it's like everyone innately kind of knows that. I often joke and say you never see ads on television for exercise because exercise is free. They can't charge you. You know, you can say go to the gym, but they can't say go for a run because you're not going to pay anyone to go for a run. So they don't advertise it, even though if you do it, it'll make you feel good and it'll make you stronger and it'll make you healthier. But the world we live in wants to make you buy something instead. So does that make sense? Point is you can do things without money to make you feel good, right? And to make you happy or happier. And yet the system we live in doesn't really like to say that. But this movie kind of put an emphasis on money as if money will get you happiness. And yet it was synthetic and it felt quite artificial and you didn't really care if they made money. And some of them, I don't even know that you wanted to see them make money. It was sort of like, what's your contribution to the world? Like, where's your hard work? And then the main guy who it's based on, even he was sort of like, okay, so he's a guy who sits behind a computer and he's got his eye on the stock market, and the way it's directed doesn't make you care that much. It doesn't seem like he has that much of an uphill struggle, and yet it's integrated with a lot of genuine news broadcasts and stuff, and that's kind of cool. But it doesn't have a film like The Social Network is much better at making the main guy more interesting and someone you get behind. There's something that the notorious Tate brothers say, those who shall not be named because of probably algorithms, which probably stopping me getting views anyway. But they said more than once that if somebody suddenly makes millions, right? If a 20-year-old catches a crypto pump and they're a millionaire overnight, it doesn't instantly make that person respectable or courageous or confident or whatever. It's just the description is it was a nerd who's broke, and now it's a nerd who's worth 20 million. But he's still a nerd. He's just a nerd with 20 million. And there's a lot of truth to that. Okay, the whole way that human beings are is things don't really change overnight. It's interesting. You find people who go from everyday living to becoming famous, and it's like you can't just change your brain. You can't just say, oh, okay, now I'm famous, so I'm going to act differently. It's like, no, you're still the same person you were yesterday. If you change at all, it's going to be a gradual thing. But in this movie, it kind of felt like, so this guy has his family, that's good. Kind of respect him the most for that, for raising a child and things. And it's like and the mountain he's climbing is sitting behind a computer going, I'm going to put money into this. Now, if his real goal was to make everyone else rich, if his real goal was to cripple capitalism and to cripple these billionaires and to change the world, then you might really get behind him. And I think that was something they could have driven the story more along. Even if it's fictional, it's just something we could have gotten behind more as an audience. But it seemed more like he's kind of doing it to make his own money, and then he's doing it to make a point. But it's like, you still don't feel like this is a real mountain. This ain't a Rocky story. This is just like a story. And then I have to say one other thing about it. The last thing I'd probably say is there's a frequent emphasis on the idea that like the billionaires are assholes. The billionaires are bad. The billionaires are, to a degree, the villains. And you can tell that story, but the problem is there's nothing in it which makes us feel that way about them. You can't just say that person's rich and then expect us to inherently dislike them. Like there's a one of the billionaires in this film. Every time someone hangs up the phone after they finish speaking to him, they always go like, "Arsehole, what an arsehole." But it's like, why are they saying that? They haven't given us a reason to understand it. And as a good example, that billionaire, right? So there's a scene where, I won't say this character who's a multi-millionaire, is worth hundreds of millions. He loses hundreds of millions because of, you know, the market screwing him because of the GameStop thing. And this billionaire who's supposed to be an arsehole gets phoned by the guy who's lost hundreds of millions. And the billionaire says, "Hey, don't worry about it. You know, essentially, we take care of each other. How much do you need? Don't even mention how much you need. It's yours. You can have your money back. You know, these things happen. Take care of yourself. Don't stress." And it actually is the complete opposite. Even though he's like, it means nothing to him. He's worth so many billions. It's like, yeah, have 200 million, have 400 million. Doesn't matter. Don't worry. I don't want to see your life ruined. It's like, okay, so it doesn't mean much to him to do that, but it's still like, how are we supposed to believe this is a villain? Why would we think he's an asshole if he's just like, we take care of each other, we take care of our own? And it's like, maybe they're saying, well, they're so rich, money doesn't matter to them, but it still hasn't painted these people as bad people. So it's kind of like, you're not really rooting for the poor people to get rich, and you're not really like rooting for the rich people to lose their money. You kind of feel in a way bad for some of them, like because there's just, you kind of assume that they worked to get there. Like it's a weird mishmash. So I'd say there aren't enough people to root for. The lead character, you don't really feel like he's climbed enough of a mountain to even deserve what he's got. He doesn't feel like, in a natural way of human progression, like a kind of what they'd call the hero's journey. It's kind of hard to believe in that when he's just sitting behind a computer. The so-called villains don't feel like villains. The characters don't live up to their potential. The music is often very bad. It gets less bad after a point, and it's just not a very good film. Like, unfortunately, it's not a very good film. You don't come out having learned much. There's a lot of text on the screen at the end of the movie, which feels kind of like they're trying to shoehorn in all the stuff they missed. Like, we kind of missed this from the plot. I don't mind text in a movie. I'll watch a subtitle movie, no problem. But when you stick like 5 different pages of white text on a black screen at the end, it kind of feels like, oh shit, maybe we missed something. Oh crap, we should have said this in the story, but we didn't. So we're gonna say it now. But yeah, overall, it's a bit of a shame. And I'd say one tiny last thing is in the run-up to the movie, it had a really good advertising campaign, and I was really excited to see it. And actually on trains, and I've never seen this before, but they started advertising the movie on trains, and it had these narrow posters. And they said on the posters, it was just written, and it said, billionaires don't meet in offices, and they don't do 9-to-5 jobs to move their money about. They meet on tennis courts, and they pass billions back and forth during their game, and they refer to you as dumb money. And because essentially they're taking your money, right? And it said like, maybe you want to find out who those people are, something like that was the ad. And that was so much more interesting and so much more compelling than the movie. That felt like revolution. That felt almost like yeah, I mean, revolutionary. It felt like the kind of thing somebody who wanted to plan a revolt would spray up on trains and be like, billionaires meet on tennis courts and call you dumb money. What are you going to do about it? It kind of felt like that. But when you watch the movie, it's like, where's the revolution? Where's the revolt? What do we get behind? And then as a resolution to the movie, they kind of like are saying, I'm not really giving anything away, but they're sort of saying, this is turning the tide. This is something where now we can see that the poor guy can cripple the billionaire. But I was watching it going, well, no, because the billionaires all sorted each other out, and then which isn't really giving stuff away, that is what we knew about it, right? This is in the news and stuff. When banks crash, everyone gets poor except the rich. But then it's sort of like, if you know anything about the system, that people way up in the highest echelons will go, oh, there was a gap where somebody could come through from nothing and cripple us. We need to patch that. There's a hole in the boat, patch the hole, make sure that doesn't happen again. And I kind of came out of the cinema thinking, well, that's not going to happen twice, because now that it's already happened once, they know how to stop it happening again. So it's not really a revolution. It's just like, the rich will continue to get richer, or at least to stay rich, and this tiny gap for the poor that happened is one. There will be other holes, there always are, but it's like that one's been patched. So what's the film trying to say? Anyway, at the end, the final thing is, it's just not a very good movie. It's okay, it's entertaining. I mean, if you're interested in the story, like, I would totally watch it. I don't regret watching it at all. I enjoyed it, but I was just thinking, considering it's such a fascinating story, it really should have been a much better movie, and it wasn't. Anyway, all right, I'm gonna go now. I hope you enjoyed this review. There are still films I haven't seen Oppenheimer yet, which is just terrible. But I've been so busy, and partly because it was so big, I was kind of like, yeah, it's gonna be on. So I honestly haven't seen it, which is really crazy. But I have been I've been very occupied. So I am gonna get round to that one, and then you'll know what I say about that. All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in, and it's always nice to talk about this. I love talking about movies, and movies are a big thing in my life for sure. So let's make this more regular, okay? It's my fault, but if you comment, encourage. Let's keep the ball rolling. I want to do more of these. All right, see you guys. Take care.